Let me give you my thoughts on the latest revelations of Downing Street parties. I really do think that for quite some time now, we need to narrow down to the very few dates in 2020 when number 10 Downing Street were not holding parties, whether it's cheese and wine parties, Zoom quizzes that aren't all on Zoom, or the latest revelation about a bring your own booze party to celebrate the lovely weather on the 20th of May 2020. Let's think back to what life was like on that date. The rules stated very clearly, and they were reiterated by the then Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden just an hour before this party started at 6 o'clock that evening. You were only allowed to meet one other person outdoors, not allowed to meet anyone from another household indoors, and outdoors you were not allowed to meet in your own garden. Non-essential shops were still shut, pubs, restaurants, bars, cafes, all hospitality remained closed, as did schools at that time. You couldn't attend a funeral. You couldn't visit a loved one in a care home. You couldn't be with a loved one at a hospital. Playgrounds were closed in public parks, for goodness sake. We didn't have the rule of 6 outdoors until a month later. No children's birthday parties. Life was really very, very grim at that time, but not for those who worked at number 10. According to the email sent by the Prime Minister's principal private secretary, they'd all been working very hard. So it was time to celebrate the lovely weather by bring your own booze to a Downing Street bash on at 6 o'clock on the 20th of May. This was sent out to 100 people. We understand some 40 attended. They included the Prime Minister and his to-be wife, Carrie Johnson. Now, the key thing here is, the point is not just that they broke the rules, not just that they thought there was one rule for them and another rule for the rest of us. The key point is something different. They broke the rules because they knew that the rules were stupid and unnecessary. They broke the rules because they knew no one was going to die if a group of healthy young people who worked together all day met up for a drink in a garden. And they were quite right about that. Yet they continued to impose those very same cruel and unnecessary rules on the rest of us. And they brought them back again for most of 2021 as well, for months on end. This shows nothing but contempt for the rest of us. They think the rest of us are just too stupid, too ignorant, too immoral to make decisions to keep ourselves, our loved ones and our fellow citizens safe by making sensible decisions about handling COVID. There was a time when people in public life were expected to behave with some integrity. They didn't always behave with integrity, but at least when they were caught out, they had the decency to resign. Apparently not anymore. The police are now apparently investigating, along with Sue Gray. We may or may not find out all the details. We may or may not get an apology, a mea culpa, who knows? But it defies belief to me right now that anyone who organised or attended that party at number 10 at the height of the first lockdown should still be in their job tomorrow. And I mean anyone. 7:08 is the time. Let's talk to Peter Cardwell. He's talkRADIO's political editor. Peter, another day, another lockdown party.
Unbelievable. Boris Johnson's words coming back to haunt him. Is apparently astonished at the fact that these parties were going on.
Oh,
well, hold on a second. Weren't you there, Boris Johnson? So I think a lot of anger today. There will be an attempt at what's called an urgent question, getting him or another minister to the House of Commons to explain this, although whether it actually can be explained or not is another matter. I think Martin Reynolds, his principal private secretary, very senior civil servant, the man who runs Boris Johnson's life from the civil service side, I think it's very doubtful he'll be in the same job by the end of today. The fact there is a police probe into all of this, extremely serious. But those words of Boris Johnson, the words that he said, the astonishment he professed that these parties were going on under his nose. Yeah. Oh, I was in a different part of the building, or I wasn't in the building at the time. If he actually took part, and if his then fiance, now wife, took part as well, what did he know and why didn't he tell us that? So I think there are a lot of questions around this, a heck of a lot of anger from people, and I think Labour will be holding Boris's feet to the fire on this. Angela Rayner has been talking about how this is, yes, there is an inquiry into this. Boris Johnson tried to say yesterday, oh, there's an inquiry. Very simple question. Prime Minister, were you there?
Yeah.
Were you there? Did you break the rules? Yes or no? You don't need an inquiry to sort that out. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people very, very angry about this morning.
And he knows he was there. There are numerous witnesses who claim he was at this party. And we've got the email trail from this Principal Private Secretary, Martin Reynolds. And yeah, I think he should definitely not still be in his job. However, I don't want him to be just the fall guy. Everyone who attended, as far as I'm concerned, needs to go. In that email, he wrote, "We thought it would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather." We. Who's we? He's the man who basically, handles everything that the Prime Minister does and who he sees, where he goes. He's in charge of his diary. Who was the we he was referring to if it was not the Prime Minister? And bearing in mind, everyone's been working very hard and lots of people were working very hard. People in hospitals, people in supermarkets, people in many other jobs were working very hard. They still weren't allowed to have these sort of events. But also, crucially, they'd had a bash only 5 days earlier on the 15th of May. We've got photographs of that one, the wine and cheese party in the Rose Garden. I mean, they were doing this every other day.
I think a lot of people would have liked to have made the best of the lovely weather. Yeah. And unsurprisingly, there was disbelief from many people within Downing Street that this was even happening. We've got to remember that 100 people were invited. 60 of them chose not to go for whatever reason.
It's not like they had other commitments, is it?
Well, indeed, lots of people saying, "Is this for real?" was one of the emails that's emerged. People saying, hold on a second. I mean, literally in the same building, Oliver Dowden, the then Culture Secretary, now the chairman of the Conservative Party, saying, stay at home if you're out and about. If you meet one other person in public, in the open air, that's just about okay. Yeah. By the way, in an hour's time, less than an hour, 40 people are going to meet for a party here in this building.
I mean, they must have known. I mean, they must have known it was against the rules because they were talking about the rules all of the time. I mean,
they made the rules. They made the rules.
Yeah, I mean,
they were the ones making the rules.
And when we look back at what people weren't allowed to do now, obviously the focus always comes to the media. People who lost loved ones to COVID. So people lost loved ones to a million other things other than COVID at that time. More people were still dying of cancer and heart disease and dementia than were dying, of COVID on any given day. And it doesn't matter what people die of, you're still losing a loved one. And people weren't able to attend funerals. I've seen messages from people saying, there were 4 people were allowed at a funeral. People who didn't see their loved ones because of COVID coming in, and then during the lockdown not allowed to see them. They go into hospital or they're in a care home. They're locked out of the care home. I know I had an aunt in a care home at a time. I used to just call and say, right, I'm going to be dropping round some flowers. I remember it was her birthday on the 24th of May, and I remember driving up and saying, make sure you're walking through reception at this time so that I can wave hello at you and leave the flowers for you. Because I wasn't allowed to go in, wasn't allowed to meet her in the garden. No, that would have been completely illegal. So we know what the rules were. My husband's birthday was the day before the 20th. It was just me, him, and my daughter in the garden. Not allowed to do anything. No one allowed to go to the pub. No one allowed to come to our home or go to anyone else's home. And we stuck to those rules. I'm sure, like most families, we didn't obey every single rule to the letter. And there was a little bit of slippage because, let's face it, they were pretty hard to keep to for an awful lot of people. But by and large, people did what they thought was the right thing. People are law-abiding. I certainly know many people who stuck to the absolute letter. And these people are going to be furious. People who didn't get to say goodbye to loved ones. People whose weddings were cancelled. Children's key milestones in children's lives being cancelled. And yet here they were just thinking, oh, well, we've been working hard. The weather's nice. Let's have a party. What? I mean, you've worked in government. You've been a special advisor. What do you think was the thought process? Did they think did they genuinely think the rules didn't apply to them? Did they genuinely think they deserved it? Did they think they would never get caught?
I don't know is the answer. I think that, and the thing with any big political scandal is that it's simple. It is simple and easy to understand. You've mentioned from your own personal life, Julia, I was at a funeral, much loved elderly aunt, and there were 14 of us there during this period, more than double that, having a party in the back garden of number 10. I think almost everybody will have some sort of story like that, will have some sort of sacrifice that they made to obey the rules. And what was actually going on here and what the thought process was behind this is something that Sue Gray, the redoubtable, formidable civil servant, will get to eventually. But she almost doesn't need to. We know what the scandal is here. We know what the cover-up is. We just need to listen to the Prime Minister's words again, saying, "Oh goodness me, there were parties going on. My goodness."
Yes. But also, as you say, were you or were you not there? If he says he wasn't there and there are loads of witnesses saying he was, that's a resigning matter. If he was there, as far as I'm concerned, that's a resigning matter. Look, I didn't want Jeremy Corbyn to be elected leader of this country for many different reasons, and I didn't want Keir Starmer to be elected either. And I'm told, like, oh well, you bought into the Boris Johnson thing. I genuinely, I thought he was the best man for the job, doing delivering the policies that the majority of us wanted, and I was proven right by that in terms of delivery on Brexit. And I think a lot of the time during the COVID pandemic, he actually handled things pretty well. I've been very pleased that he has finally grown a backbone since July, and he's been doing a lot of the right things. And we're not in the sort of restrictions we're seeing either across Europe or across other parts of the UK. But there's got to be some level of integrity. There's got to be some fundamental level of integrity where if you impose very strict rules on other people's lives that really massively affect people's personal lives, that you obey them yourselves. And I just don't think it's tenable for him to continue. Sue Gray is only doing this investigation because she had to replace Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, because he was investigating the parties, and it turns out that he walked in, just to pick someone up, so to chat to someone who was attending one of the parties and knew they were happening. I mean, this was just common knowledge across Whitehall. We know the police are now involved. Finally, they think there's enough evidence for them to get involved. Do you think there will be a police probe, a proper police investigation? Could there be charges brought, given that, 20,000 people or so have been prosecuted for breaching lockdown rules?
Yes, the police this morning are looking into this. They're liaising with the Cabinet Office. More information is coming out about this all the time. I think more will come out over the course of today. But there are two things politically as well as legally here. The urgent question probably later on, the very simple question, Prime Minister, were you there? If so, you broke the rules. And secondly, a lot of this polling, there'll be more of it in the coming days, saying that Boris Johnson is now becoming an electoral liability, not an asset, a liability for the Conservative Party. And I think that is when the backbenchers in the Conservative Party say, hold on a second here. Okay, this guy delivered Brexit. He did a good job in 2019, but actually events since then and this scandal and a number of others, 12 probes in the last year into Conservative sleaze, many of them involving indirectly or directly Boris Johnson. So the question is whether he is the right person to be the leader of the Conservative Party. And I think there will be a number of people in the Conservative Party scratching their heads this morning and thinking, is this the right guy to lead us, not just at the moment, but into the next election? Because the Conservative Party, more than any other party in this country, is about winning elections above all else.